Hey guys, what's up? I'm here today with my good friend Dre, master birder and expert in the field, right? But Dre's my homie. We go out birding a lot. And today I'm here to teach you guys about some of the rules of bird photography composition. There's so many things you can know about it, and there's only a few kind of like rules and ideas and things I'm going to get into today. Yeah, I'll just dive straight into it and teach you guys a little bit about how to compose your bird shots. So when you're shooting birdscapes, it's really important to think about framing your subjects on a third. Of course, all the things I'm about to say are general rules, so they don't always apply, but 90-95% of the time, these are the things that you're gonna wanna be doing. So when you're shooting a birdscape, you want it on the third, and one of the reasons for that is if you have it in the center too much, it keeps all the attention on the bird, and if you're shooting a wider shot on a bird anyways, or you're trying to focus a lot on the background and the setting that it's in, you kind of lose a lot of that if it's in the middle. So Dre here is gonna hold my Tupac the Toucan, I like to call him, and he's gonna show you some examples of the different types of compositions depending on where you put the bird in the frame. So you can see here, if you put the bird on the third of the frame, it's gonna give you a different type of feel than if you put it in the center. If you put it in the center, your eye kind of like revolves around it, but there's also a lot of empty space. Your eye doesn't quite know what to do as much. Whereas if you put it on a third, it feels more artistic. It feels a little bit more like it's in the environment. It feels more like it's in the setting, and it'll give you usually a better result for birdscape type of shots. For bird portraits, you kind of want to think of the opposite. So while in birdscapes, you're putting them on the thirds, typically with bird portraits, you want to be putting them as center as possible. And one of the reasons for that is you want all the attention on the bird when you're taking a bird portrait. Bird portraits are usually more useful when you're really up and close with the bird, or you want to get a really tight frame on a bird. And the reason for that is if you put a bird on the third when you're framing it in a portrait, not always, but typically your eye starts to kind of wander off towards the center and wander off and be pulled back in and pulled back in. And you want your eyes to stay focused on that bird in the center of the frame. So when you have the bird in the center of the frame, your eye does a better job of staying focused on the bird, and you don't lose your attention on other parts of the frame that really don't matter in a bird portrait type of shot. So the next thing I want to talk to you guys is background. Background is wildly important in the composition of your shots. If you don't have a good background in your shots are going to be horrible. I can't tell you how many times I see people who are bird photographers shooting into blue skies up on a bird or with overexposed backgrounds, and it just looks nasty. You never want those in your shots, and it's really going to take away from a lot of the artistry of your bird photos. If you're just trying to see the bird, sometimes you know, if you're just mostly a birder and you're not really caring too much about how the shots turn out, then you can do that stuff. But if you're really wanting quality images, you gotta think about the background of your shot. You gotta position yourself accordingly. So when I'm out in the field, I'm constantly thinking about my backgrounds that I'm using in my shots. I'm trying to get the birds in those specific spots or wait till they come to those specific spots rather than trying to follow them into shots that are not gonna have good backgrounds and I know I'm not gonna like anyways. So one of the first most important things about background is having the exposure right. I can't tell you how important it is to have the exposure proper and to not have your highlights blown out in your background. There's a lot of times where you'll see a photo and it could have been a great photo, but it has a blown out background and it just does not look good when you blow it up on a screen, or even on Instagram, it doesn't look that great. So for example, if you're shooting up against a bird with a backlit sky, a lot of times the background's gonna be too overlit, and it's just gonna take a lot of the quality away from your photo. You're gonna get some weird halos around the birds that aren't appealing if they're not exposed properly, so you don't wanna overexpose your backgrounds. Another example is if the bird is in a shadow, but the background's totally exposed by the sun, really bright, and the shadow is pretty dark, you're gonna get a pretty gnarly background reflecting around the bird, and it's not gonna look that appealing. So you definitely want to think about exposure in your background. And the reverse is true. If the background is too dark, sometimes that can play well into a creative shot, but a lot of times you're not going to wind up liking the photo because there's just not enough going on in the background and it's just only on the bird, and sometimes you need more than that to make a nice bird portrait or a nice birdscape shot. The next thing I want to talk to you guys about is dynamics in the backgrounds of your shots. It's so important to have dynamics in your shots because otherwise you're just going to take photo after photo and it's all going to look the same. There's some like bird photographers that you can see out there that maybe just have like a perch that they'll set up maybe in their backyard, and they'll just take the same shot every day with just different birds. And that's kind of cool. Like you get, you know, maybe some new birds that are coming by, but every shot just looks the same after a while. And personally for me, that doesn't really do it. I want to see every shot kind of be unique and be different. And so I think it's just so important to have a different dynamic in each shot. What's in the background will matter so much for your shot. So let's say you have a tree maybe arcing around the side of the bird, or maybe let's say you have like a lake on one side and then like a different color setting of trees in the background on another side. Those are important things to keep in mind. The best example of this is in the fall. In the fall, when you have beautiful colors in the background, you can add so much dynamic to your bird shots by getting those red, yellow, green mixes in the background. It'll give so much more life and color to your photos, so much more contrast, and really make your bird photo look unique rather than just like another bird photo that's been pulled off the internet. Next thing I want to talk to you guys about is positioning. Positioning is so important in bird photography and cannot be stressed enough. A lot of times you'll see bird photos that might be taken at an upwards angle or a downwards angle. And I can tell you that 99% of the time, those are not going to be good shots. There are shots that I've seen and that sometimes I'll take where you could take a downwards angle on a photo and it might look really nice, but those are far and few between. As well as up shots, I really almost have never taken a good upwards angle shot. And it's so important to get eye level with the bird. The reason why is because you get a proper background with it typically. You can also get depth of field with it. And a lot of times you don't wind up shooting into an overexposed sky, whereas you would if you were shooting up, or if you're shooting down at the ground, it kind of just smashes the bird typically, and with the ground, and you don't get depth of field. So that's why shooting eye level is so important typically in your bird photos. The next thing you guys should be thinking about is foreground in your shots. Foreground is so important, and I think it's so underused in wildlife and bird photography. I love using foreground in my shots. I think it adds so much to your bird photos. And the first thing I want to say about it is it's just going to add a uniqueness to your bird photos that not many other bird photographers use currently. I think there's something special about foreground. I really like how it can give another layer of depth to your shot. And I think foreground is just so important in making a unique and artistic photo. Again, like anything, it doesn't always have to be used, but it can be extremely helpful if you want it to be. One of the coolest things about foreground is it can help give you compositional balance. So you can see some shots I've taken, for example, in which there will be a bird in the frame, but it really would be missing a large part of the amazingness of the shot if there wasn't a foreground in it. And that foreground will help reveal the bird in the way I want it to be revealed. For example, if you were watching my first video, the Pinochi Hills video, where I had the horned lark, the last image I pop up with it is this image where there's a lot of foreground that's blurring out around the bird, and then there's a background that's blurring out in the back. And then I have this bird standing by itself in the midst of all that. And it's so powerful because it gives like a hidden effect to the bird. It really melts everything else away around it. And it gives a lot of balance because I had the foreground kind of blurring out the right side of the frame. It gives a lot of balance to the slight offsetness from the thirds that the horned lark has in the photo. Another shot you may have seen this with is the Wilson snipe shot that I got 2 videos ago, in which there's a little gap and a little U that I use in the foreground in the grass. There's a little U that dips in the center and almost creates like a center little pathway tunnel that you can see through, and you see the Wilson snipe in that image, and it creates a really nice frame for him. Whereas if I was missing that foreground, it really would have taken away from that shot, and that shot would have been really worthless actually. And my favorite part about foreground is actually it gives you something to control. A lot of times in bird photography, there's so few factors that you can control, and a lot of times you have to kind of sometimes take what you see. But with foreground, what I really love about it is you can be set up, right? So you're set up, and if you have like maybe like a bush sticking right here, right? You can kind of control where that bush is on you just by moving slightly left or right. And that's so important because let's say, for example, like you have a really nasty sky or maybe an overexposed section in the background just to the right of the bird. And if you're looking at the bird and then all of a sudden he moves 5 feet to the right, let's say you had a nice frame and everything, he moves 5 inches to the right, you may suddenly lose that nice background. But what foreground allows you to do is kind of cover up that missing background or that ugly background with the foreground, with that blur of the image, and allow you to move with that bird and still create a nice depth of field. I love that about foreground. I think it's one of the coolest tricks that I like to use with foreground, and I think it can really help improve your bird photography. And the last thing I want to say with bird composition is think about your focal lengths. A lot of people don't do this, and I'll admittedly say I am not good at doing this yet, but this is something I want to be better at. There's very few shots I've taken with this concept in mind, but a lot of times we're shooting, you know, at the max amount of millimeters in our focal length that we can get to, and a lot of times you're right, that does create for the best bird photos. But sometimes it's really interesting and creative to mix it up and kind of change your focal length and maybe get a wider angle shot, or even if it's just slightly wider or if it's really wide, and it can give you some interesting effects. See, for example, in this shot, Tupac, if I get him out in the distance, he has kind of, you know, this typical bird portrait look with him. But if I get this wide angle look on him, it gives a really unique perspective to this shot that is not taken by a lot of photographers. And if you can successfully take these shots with a camera trap or remote shutter or things like that, you can get some really unique images that a lot of people aren't putting out right now. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for subscribing below. I hope this video helped you out, helped you learn how to compose your shots correctly in wildlife and bird photography. And if there's anything you guys want to see for how-tos, let me know and I'd be more than happy to make a video about it. Until then, I'll see you guys next time. See you on the next wildlife photography adventure. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and hope you get out and get some great shots.